All right. Your next witness then?
Thank you, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls Erin Falati, also known as Erin Falati, and Ms. Hurd's counsel begins the questioning.
Okay, thank you.
Provide your full name.
Erin Falati.
And is Borum your maiden name?
Correct.
Okay, so Borum was your last name in the 2014 to 2016 timeframe, correct?
That's correct.
Have you communicated with anybody else from Mr. Depp's counsel other than Ms. Vasquez?
Not that I recall. Oh, excuse me, I do. I don't remember his name, I'm so sorry. I feel like I spoke with him. I don't know his last name.
Did you speak to or communicate with Adam Waldman?
Perhaps. I don't recall his last name.
Okay. And do you recall when that occurred?
That would have been 2019 because I had a newborn at that time. So maybe May, June, July, something like that, 2019.
So this is a text exchange between you and Mr. Waldman?
It appears so.
Okay. And do you recall speaking to Mr. Waldman at all?
Yes.
And do you recall that when you were communicating with Mr. Waldman was Mr. Depp's attorney?
Yes.
Ms. Falati, you're a trained nurse, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you have any specialties?
Well, I haven't been working, like I used to, but previously I was trained in addictions and mental health.
And when you say addictions, are there a specific type of addictions you were trained in?
All that I primarily worked with chemical dependency.
And where did you receive training for addiction and mental health?
Different employment places, and then I became a certified registered addictions nurse.
You know who Dr. David Kipper is, correct?
Correct.
Did you work for Dr. Kipper?
Not directly, but he would hire the agency I provided nursing services for, which was Turning Point, I believe. So I worked under his guidance, but not specifically for him. Most of the time. There have been times where I've worked specifically for him.
Okay. When did you start working for Turning Point Nursing Services, or whatever the name of that company was?
I don't recall. My best guess would be somewhere between 2007 or 8.
And when did you start to begin to do any work for Dr. Kipper?
I believe 2014.
What were the circumstances that started you working for Dr. Kipper in 2014?
If I recall correctly, it would be for services for Ms. Hurd.
Were you ever responsible for Mr. Depp's nursing care while he was under the treatment of Dr. Kipper?
I provided him with nursing care.
It's true. Ms. Falati, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 2 to your deposition. And these are AH TPD 16929 through 16959. And is that the paper documents you have, a set of the paper documents you have in front of you?
Part of it. The first page.
And the first page might have said at the bottom also K182.
Yes, I have that.
Okay. Do you recognize these as your, what are these?
These are my nursing notes kept for Ms. Hurd. Yes.
And these are notes you created?
Yes.
Did you create these notes in the ordinary course of business?
Yes.
Okay. Were you trained in how to prepare these notes?
Yes.
Would you write these how long after the visit would you write up these notes?
Would depend. Sometimes I would keep notes on my phone that I would transfer to the Word document when I was in front of my laptop. And if not possible, I would do it as soon as feasible.
And how often would you show these notes to Dr. Kipper?
I don't recall. At intervals, but I don't recall.
So if you look at the first page of the notes, the first entry is August 27th, 2014, correct?
Yes.
And you wrote RN has been hired to provide private nursing care for client Amber Heard, right?
Correct.
Right. And RN refers to you, correct? And an RN means registered nurse, correct?
Correct.
And throughout the notes, and you say this here, Amber Heard would be referred to as client or AH, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And Johnny Depp would be referred to as JD?
That's correct.
Would you agree that Mr. Depp and Amber would get into verbal arguments?
I recall a general sense of discord in the relationship.
And what do you mean by general sense of discord?
I just recall there being disagreements, reconciliation, and kind of that repeating pattern.
And would you be at times taking care of Amber because of the disagreements between Mr. Depp and Amber?
I provided emotional support. I was not present with her often, but was available over the phone, via text, and sometimes in person.
Do you recall that in March 2015, Amber went to Australia to be with Mr. Depp?
Yes, I remember she went to Australia. As to the dates, I would have to look through documentation to ascertain the exact dates.
Okay. And on Exhibit 2, this is your note of March 7th, 2015?
That's correct.
And you wrote, client notifies RN via text of increasing anxiety?
Yes, I wrote that.
And then on 3/8/15, you wrote, RN received report from Debbie RN. Debbie being Debbie Lloyd, correct?
That's correct.
Do you recall what the report you received was on March 8th, 2015 from Debbie?
I mean, I'm just reading my notes.
Sure.
So to answer your question, no, I don't recall specifics of what the report would have been. I assume, based on this note, that would have been a phone call.
Okay. And it says client will be returning to Los Angeles on March 9th, 2015, accompanied by house manager Ben. Do you see that?
Yeah.
Did you have an understanding as to why Amber was leaving Australia in March of 2015?
Yes. I don't know if this is the exact timing, but you know better than I, there was an incident in Australia and they had to be, Ms. Heard and Mr. Depp had to be separated. So Ms. Heard returned to Los Angeles for my nursing notes, and I believe Mr. Depp must have stayed in Australia.
What was your understanding as to why Mr. Depp and Amber had to be separated?
It's hard to recall specifics because I wasn't there or involved at the time, but became involved again. I remember hearing from other people that there was quite an argument between the two in Australia.
Do you have any understanding if anyone was injured during the argument between Amber and Mr. Depp?
Physically injured?
Physically, yeah.
Again, I wasn't present, so I'm only speaking as to what I recall during that time period and what I sort of remember hearing from others. And also, I just remember Mr. Depp's finger was injured. I can't tell you specifically which one, but I remember there was an injury to his finger.
Do you have any understanding as to how his finger was injured?
No.
And then, Erin, you wrote the next note on March 9th, 2015 that says RN and CT in touch via text and phone calls after client arrived at 1500.
Yes, I wrote that.
Okay. And 1500, you're using military time, correct?
That's correct.
So that would be 3 p.m.?
Correct.
Okay. And you wrote client expressed feeling, quote, sad, right?
Yes, I wrote that.
So do you recall what Amber was sad about at approximately March 9th, 2015?
I can't speak to the, I don't remember specifically, but I would assume based on my March 8th note, I would make the assumption that those feelings were in relation to the relationship issues.
You wrote client states she would like to discuss recent events between her and husband with RN in private tomorrow. Plans are made for RN to visit client at her home tomorrow.
Yes, I wrote that.
Do you recall all the conversation you had with Amber regarding the events between her and Mr. Depp at around this March 9th, 2015 timeframe?
No, I don't recall specifics.
Do you recall anything in general?
I really don't. I'm sorry.
Did Amber express any fear of Mr. Depp at this time?
Don't recall. I don't see that in this note, so I can't speak to that.
And then the note for March 10th, 2015, you see that note?
I do.
You can take this down. we put up attachment 25, please?
Stand by. And exhibit 4.
Ms. Falati, I'm showing you a text chain between you and Whitney Hurd on March 23rd, 2015. Do you see that?
Yes, I do.
And on March 23rd, 2015, you texted to Whitney Hurd, Debbie just told me what's going on and to check with you, is Amber awake or fall asleep? Do you see that?
I do.
And then Ms. Hurd wrote she finally fell asleep. You see that?
Yes.
Okay. Then you wrote, thank goodness, she must be exhausted.
I'm sorry, just to confirm, this is from Whitney Hurd, not Amber Hurd, correct?
As I understand it, it says Whit Hurd. Is that your understanding?
I assume. Thank you.
And then do you recall ever communicating with Whitney Hurd via text or chat?
That sounds familiar.
Okay. And you wrote, thank goodness, she must be exhausted. Do you want me to come to the loft, or is she safe and sound asleep? You see that?
I do see that.
Okay. And then Whitney wrote, safe? Question mark? No, she's not. Kept saying she wants to kill herself. You see that?
See that?
Were you ever concerned about Ms. Hurd's safety as it relates to Mr. Depp?
So if she made comments to me that she was not safe, I would be concerned about her to ensure that she was safe. Yes.
Do you recall Ms. Hurd making comments to you about her safety?
I remember a general sense when they, meaning Ms. Hurd and Mr. Depp, would have arguments. She would often have her friends around her for support, but from a general, physical sense, she was always in a safe place.
And you mean in a general physical sense, she was always in a safe place? What do you mean by that?
Meaning she was always, not always, I should say, often home, often surrounded with friends. She had friends that lived right down the hallway from her, so she was always supported.
Was Mr. Depp friends with Marilyn Manson?
Yes, I believe.
Ms. Falati, I'm showing you what's marked as Exhibit 7, and these are texts that Mr. Depp produced between you and him. And I'm focusing on this text message of October 31st, 2015. You see that? Well, so this text message between you and Whitney is on March 23rd, 2015. You see that?
I do.
Okay. And if we go back to Exhibit 2, and I'll go back. Oops. There's no entry for March 23rd, 2015.
Yeah.
You see that? Not everything you did for Ms. Hurd as a nurse is reflected in these notes, correct? And the next notes we have are November 25th, 2015. Do you know why there's a long period where there's no notes?
Yes. Perhaps I can shed some light for you and everyone on the relationship. When I was first hired to care for Ms. Hurd, I worked full time. I was assigned 24/7 basically. And after a period of time, I became more part-time and on call. And I was working with different clients at the time. So I would, I would not be working regularly, but would also be available if an issue arose or a medication change needed or things like that. So I would assume that would account for this gap.
Why did you move from full-time to part-time?
I don't know the exact answer, but I assume that's not my decision to make. That's usually the client and or treating physician.
Okay, so that's the first page of Exhibit 2.
Yes, thank you. So if you can you go down to, it's about the third paragraph a little bit, yes. Per report from JD, which refers to Mr. Depp, Debbie, RN, and Dr. Kipper, client AH, which is Ms. Heard, has reportedly been experiencing increased anxiety and agitation recently and has had several outbursts of anger and rage. From what I remember, when I was involved in the case, it was to help assist Ms. Heard with some emotional issues, anxiety issues, in attempts to assist, in layman's term, kind of calming things down a bit.
Do you recall any examples that you knew of anger and rage showed by Amber?
I do recall seeing her very angry. I have to refer to my notes. It was in London, so that would have been 2014. And I believe it was in reference to a violating incident where her phone had been hacked and she was quite upset. I saw her angry at that time, and other times I don't recall.
Were you in London with Amber at the time?
Yes.
And how was Amber showing her anger?
I recall loud, kind of elevated voice, yelling, crying, quite upset.
Do you recall receiving a call from Amber around December 16th, 2015 regarding this argument between Mr. Depp and Amber?
I don't recall a specific phone call.
Would you doubt that a phone call occurred if you wrote it down in your notes?
If I wrote it, I don't doubt that it occurred. I just don't have memory of it.
And now you see the note on December 17th, 2015?
Yes.
And you wrote RN in contact with client to notify her that she'd be able to deliver medications to her home. RN waited at the door for several minutes after knocking. Client greeted RN at the door looking disheveled. Hair appeared unbrushed. Client appeared weepy and sad. Posture is slouched. Client told RN about argument with husband. RN offered emotional support but reminded client that RN could not stay as was on duty with another client and was only visiting in order to deliver medication. Per client, she had not had contact with husband since altercation. Client had visible bright red blood appearing at center of lower lip. When RN made client aware that she was actively bleeding on her lip, client stated it was from injury sustained in the, and then it's blank, you see that? And then we can keep going down in the argument between her and her husband, and then it continues to bleed actively. You wrote that?
Yes.
And then you also wrote clients also states that her head is bruised and that she lost clumps of hair in altercation. You wrote that?
I assume so. It's in my notes.
Okay. And then you wrote, RN briefly looked at client's scalp but was unable to visualize the hematomas client had described. You wrote that?
Yes, I would agree.
And then you wrote RN encourage client to be seen by physician Dr. Kipper or go to emergency urgent care for thorough assessment. You see that?
I do.
And then you wrote client states she will contact Dr. Kipper tomorrow. Client is supported by friends Rocky and IO who will be staying in client's home with her. You wrote that?
I agree, yes.
Okay. And then on December 18th, 2015, you wrote client states she went to Dr. Kipper's office and was assessed by NP Monroe T as Dr. Kipper was out of the office. You wrote that?
Yes,
And NP stands for nurse practitioner.
that's correct.
And you understand Monroe T stood for Monroe Tinker?
Yes,
You recall if Mr. Depp ever forgot to take any of his medication?
at a specific time or ever?
In any time where you were working with him?
I would say vaguely, yes.
Ms. Falati, I'm showing it's been marked as Exhibit 11 to your deposition, which is Falati 96 through 106. You see that?
Yes,
You recall receiving this text message, right?
a vague memory of this.
Do you recall if you spoke to Amber after you received this text message? Or at any time after you received this text message around May 21st, May 22nd, 2016?
Are you saying a phone call or just?
Phone call.
I don't really recall.
It could have happened, you just don't recall one way or the other?
I would agree with that.
And you received this picture from Amber?
That's correct.
What is this picture of?
I was just asking if you could scroll down. Well, could you rewind it just a little?
Ms. Hurd.
And does the picture show redness under Miss Hurd's eyes?
You can answer as a lay person if she has such an opinion. If you have an opinion one way or the other, you can let me know.
I'm not an expert, so I mean, there's color on her face in different areas. I don't know what's what.
And you received this first picture of Amber at 12:36 a.m., correct?
That's the timestamp there.
And you received another picture at 12:36 a.m.?
It appears so.
And who do you see in that picture?
Also Ms. Hurd.
And you received a third picture of Amber at 12:36 a.m.?
Yes, it appears so.
And is that third picture of Amber?
Yes, that's Ms. Hurd.
And you received the fourth picture of Amber at 12:36 a.m.?
Then yes.
And this fourth, I think just so it's clear, the fourth picture is of Amber, correct?
That's correct.
And you received that at 12:36 a.m.?
Yes, that's the timestamp.
And these are pictures of Amber's face, correct?
Yes, that's a picture of her face and neck.
Do you recall receiving those pictures?
Like I said, I have a vague memory of this, but I don't specifically remember receiving it.
Okay. Do you know if you reported these pictures or what Ms. Hurd reported to you to Dr. Kipper?
I would assume that if any information was presented to me, I would have contacted Dr. Kipper.
And do you know how you would have contacted Dr. Kipper?
No, I depending on the date, time, I would sometimes call, email, text.
Do you recall if you wrote nurse notes for this incident?
I don't recall.
You want us to look at Exhibit 2?
That's the nursing notes?
Yeah. Why don't we do that? So there's notes for May 11th, 2016. You see that?
Yeah.
And then the next notes for May 26th, 2016.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know why you didn't include notes for May 21st, 2016?
I don't know.
And on May 26th, you wrote, client texted RN requesting Ambien as she states she's suffering from insomnia due to stress and anxiety. Client reports, quote, having the hardest week of my life, end quote. You wrote that?
Yes.
And you wrote, client states she cannot deal with the negative media publicity she has received surrounding the divorce she requested from her husband, JD. Dr. Kipper notified Ambien 10 milligrams, QHS PRN 14 ordered. Per Dr. Kipper, client is encouraged to make appointment with Dr. Kipper in office to be assessed. Client did not respond. You wrote that?
Yes.
Ms. Falati, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 12 to your deposition, which is Falati 114 through 119. You can take a look through them. It appears to be notes of when you were Mr. Depp's nurse, as opposed to Ms. Heard. But feel free to take a look.
That's correct. I think these are my nursing notes in relation to Mr. Depp.
So client now is Mr. Depp, correct?
That's correct, because these nursing notes are in reference to Mr. Depp. Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And in the nursing note for April 23rd, 2015, you wrote that Dr. Kipper will introduce Rosalind Phillip to Debbie RN and clients Amber H. and Johnny Depp. Debbie RN will assist in coordinating session appointments between clients and Ms. Phillips. Do you know if Mr. Depp and Amber ever saw Rosalind Phillip?
I don't know.
And at Falati 117, it shows notes for June 7th, 2016, correct?
That is correct.
You wrote, the following medications were approved per Dr. Kipper to be given to the client, and then there's a list of medications. You wrote these notes, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you understand that Mr. Depp was taking those medications as of June 7th, 2016?
For this nursing note, it appears that he was taking these medications listed.
And then there's a nursing note for June 26, 2016. See that?
Yes.
And it says, you wrote, client is going through divorce with wife Amber H. and is dealing with the loss of his mother, passed away 1 month ago. Client was provided with the divorce request from wife AH 3 days after mother passed away. Do you see that?
Yes.
And you wrote that?
Yes.
So was it your understanding that Amber asked for a divorce?
This note says that Mr. Depp was provided with divorce request from Ms. Heard, so it appears she was the one requesting a divorce.
Right, and you wrote, next, client states he was not aware AH wanted divorce and expresses confusion regarding AH's desire to terminate marriage. You wrote that?
Yes.
Is that what Mr. Depp told you?
I would assume if I wrote it in my notes.
Then you wrote, client's divorce has been highly publicized and wife AH has been accused him of several character damaging allegations, including domestic violence. You wrote that, correct?
Correct.
Was this on did you write this based on information Mr. Depp provided you?
I don't know. I would assume that I've had discussions with him regarding this, considering that this is a nursing note for Mr. Depp.
Did Mr. Depp tell you his character had been damaged as of June 2016?
I don't recall. I have to go by what my note says here. So it alludes to that's something that he had discussed.
And you see where you wrote, client states he felt helpless previously but is now angry at AH and wants to clear his name. Mr. Depp told you that?
Again, I don't recall for sure, but I would go back to my nursing notes because those were written more at the time. So I would assume that he and I discussed that.
Okay, farther down, you wrote, RN assisted client in processing feelings and encouraged client to continue utilizing individual therapy as he responded well to RN's use of therapeutic communication. You see that?
Yes.
And you wrote that, correct?
Yes.
Then you wrote, client is resistant, stating, quote, I don't want anyone like Amber's wife therapist. He has only made things worse, end quote. You see that?
Yes.
And you wrote that?
Yes.
And where it's quotes, I don't want anyone like Amber's therapist. He's only made things worse. That was something that Mr. Depp told you?
Again, as I have it in quotations, I assume he made that statement.
A little farther down, you wrote, throughout RN's visit, client maintains attention and is actively participating in conversation. Client consumed 3 vodka drinks during RN's 7-hour visit. Client did not eat during visit and drank water only with several prompts from RN. RN educated client on possible interactions between prescribed medication and alcohol. Client verbalized understanding but stated, quote, right now I need a little alcohol for all the bad things I'm going through, end quote. You wrote those lines?
Yes.
See, the document speaks best as to how many drinks Mr. Depp had?
Correct.
And that Mr. Depp drank 3 vodka drinks during your visit?
That's what my note says.
Then you said RN provided one-on-one emotional support and encouraged clients to limit and or abstain from alcohol and illicit drugs. You wrote that?
Yes.
Do you recall why you told Mr. Depp to abstain from illicit drugs?
No, but I did, and not just with Mr. Depp, but in my line of nursing, provide education always with any medication clients are on and contraindications.
You know if Mr. Depp ever took any illicit drugs during the 2014 to 2016 timeframe?
I don't know. I didn't witness him using any illicit drugs, so I can't speak to that.
Your Honor, at this point, the questioning switches over to questions by counsel for Mr. Depp. That's all right with us, Your Honor. I'm sorry. Let's go ahead and break for the evening. We will see you in the morning. Just do not discuss the case and do not do any outside research. All right? And we'll have the rest of this tomorrow morning. Okay? Thank you. All right, so we'll see everybody at 10 o'clock tomorrow, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.